right, you miserable accursed. We're back with day 3 of our intrepid coverage of the 2025 Canadian election campaign. We're down a Kory today. He's on an early flight, presumably just in order to find a coffee somewhere. But we are joined, as always, by Jordan Leichnitz and Scott Reid. And for the campaign purposes, NTV, Nick Taylor-Vasey. How are all you people?
Oh, not as alluringly shaded as Nick. Nick, you come hither. You got bedroom eyes, bedroom lighting.
I can turn more lights off if you want even more mystery to this.
You look like you've got something to hide, Nick.
You sing me to
Only
sleep
it's
after
a two-faced
the
thing. There's nothing to hide on this side. This side I can't speak for. This side's still asleep.
Are we sure that Kory's okay? Jenny didn't send down a rendition flight. Like it wasn't.
Yeah, I don't know if he got on the right flight. Maybe he's headed to El Salvador.
Worried.
Yeah,
that's right. He's gonna
live out the rest of his life.
He'll live out the rest of his days strapped to a basement wall in some small republic
with a beret.
That's about the kindest fate.
Nick, where the hell are you?
I'm in Stony Creek, Ontario, David. And last night I went to the Pierre Poilievre rally, and 10 minutes out, I was getting off the QEW, and I wasn't even off the highway before I hit a traffic jam. And it turned out I was thinking, like, is there an accident? But no, it was a lineup of cars snaking their way towards this.
Wow,
big...
how many people were at that rally? It looked huge.
Well, they claimed 4,500. We were kind of joking on the riser, like, how do you count 4,500 from here? And do we divide this up into quadrants and sort of, but I said thousands in what we wrote this morning because I think that's fair. It was pretty packed in there. It's pretty packed.
Yeah, it looked it. What was the energy like?
Really good energy. It felt to me like one of Poilievre's leadership campaign rallies where big cheers go out for the defund CBC and screw the World Economic Forum. And in this case, there was a lot about, of course, like steel jobs, and they ate that up as well. But it's an interesting thing to watch the Conservative Party appear to be sort of sinking in various national polls, like pretty much every single one. But then you see the energy in that room, and you're like, was there something they're missing? And it's this tension, right? Like, how much of this is the bedrock that's going to show up because this is a big city, and you're going to find this many people in any big city to go watch a rally, and how much of it is like something.
Well, the question you're asking is why it is so smart of the Conservative campaign to be holding these rallies right now.
Yeah.
Because they can, and because it puts into dispute the momentum argument.
Right.
And so you've got polling evidence on one hand, but they've got these crowds on the other hand, and it leads people to ask your question, which is, are the polls real, or is this? And so that's, I think they're helping to hold the narrative of the campaign from being a story about their decline, in part because of these rallies.
It also fortifies conservative spirits.
Yeah.
Totally. And I think Nick makes a really good point. Like, those are the true believers, looking at the video of the rally, like, you're not a casual conservative supporter if you're coming head to toe in the branded gear. So they're tapping into some of the people who are going to be with them throughout, almost regardless.
Yeah.
Right. So, Nick, what are you up to today?
I'm going to go to Oakville today and spend a little time in that part of the GTA. We'll see what's going on. Do you guys have tips? Like, what should I do in Oakville? I don't know. We'll go in our group chat. You can give me, whatever advice you think.
There's a Jack Nicklaus designed golf course out there.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I'll check that out.
Yeah.
Perkins, of course. Got to hit the Perkins. What's in that bag behind you? Is it firearms and pill bottles? That looks like a jump bag for Jason Bourne. Yeah.
These are all my worldly possessions. I'm taking these to the Hamilton airport after we've finished recording so I can go look at the unveil of the Conservative campaign plane that they won't let us get on.
Excellent. All right, so let's get to work. Where are the leaders today?
Mark Carney, guess where Mark Carney is going?
At a facility.
He will be in a facility. That's absolutely true. He'll be in Windsor, Ontario. And then he's going to be driving up the highway to London. And then he's going to be finishing in Kitchener, Ontario. So he is repeating the drive that I just did, fully vindicating me from the mockery of Monday morning. But I can't take full credit for this genius. A couple of you know my editor, Sue Allen.
Yeah.
When we were
I've
talking
heard
about the order of cities, she suggested Windsor first. So it's always a smart idea to listen to Sue. I did, and now I look
Yeah.
wonderfully, wonderfully intelligent.
She's
He's sucking up to his boss on our show.
yeah.
Like
Yeah.
Jesus, Murphy.
Well, little fact
Not
check.
subtle.
Sue's a big day
Maybe
drinker,
he'll get
so
a
I
better
wouldn't take her
hotel
advice
room.
too
I think we should
seriously.
allow it.
This
And
hotel
Kearney
room
has
is
a rally tonight.
this hotel room is pretty good. There's a rally in Kitchener, is where Carney's going to be. Yeah,
So that'll be interesting to see what kind of a crowd they get.
yeah,
there.
agreed.
And Mr. Polyev, where's he at today?
Polyev is going to, after he gets on his airplane and flies off into the skies, he's going to Quebec. So he's finishing the day in Quebec City. Jagmeet Singh starts here in Hamilton. I actually, before I go to Oakville, I will be going to a Singh event here in town.
What will he be picking up in Hamilton? Like what large container, or will he fight a wildcat off the mountain? Like what expression of masculinity will we be witness to?
I'll report back tomorrow. He's finishing in London though, so if there's like any kind of, I don't know, zoo in London that he could traipse past.
What color sweater will he be wearing over a collared shirt?
Yes. The three-piece suits.
Oh, now just
have been
because you're jealous,
shotgunned.
David.
That's right. No way I could pull that
Get you
off.
some sweaters.
Yeah.
That's right. Oh,
On all honesty, what are the NDP events like?
Haven't been to one yet. Today's my first. I'm excited.
Okay. All right. Well,
That's
we'll
maybe a
look forward-
question more for Jordan than for me at this point, but I will be able to tell you
you're the
tomorrow.
only one.
All right. Well, we'll look for that tomorrow. Thank you, Nick.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Safe travels,
Too
brother.
bad.
Yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it, that Carney comes to Ontario but doesn't begin in the GTA? Like, am I overthinking this? But like, it's interesting. He goes into unheld territory with Southwest Ontario. He goes.
He's on the offense.
It's a
They're
flex.
going for the win.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And with good reason, because we have our first tracking polling of the campaign, courtesy of Polera. Polera's polling is brought to you by Enbridge Gas, reliable, affordable natural gas to heat your homes and power our economy. So this is 1,000 cases. They're doing 500 a night. This is Monday and Tuesday. And we have Liberals, 45. Conservatives, 36. NDP, 9. BQ, 5. PPC, 3. Greens, 2. So from the baseline survey taken after Carney became Prime Minister, the Liberals are up 5. The Conservatives are flat. Ontario is 47 Liberal, 37 Conservative, 11 NDP. Men are 39 Liberal, 40 Conservative, 11 NDP.
Wow.
Women are 51 Liberal, 32 Conservative, 10 NDP.
I don't mean to cross tab you to death. Do we know how the plus 55ers are doing? Because
I don't actually, but I'll come back to you with that.
Yeah, I'd be curious
tomorrow.
for
But
millennials.
all the polls are showing those brutal blowouts for Carney, that age group.
yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
those
Like
gender
50%
numbers.
plus. Wow.
51.
So
For
Scott,
As a lifelong liberal, my question is, can we not have the fucking election today? Like, what's the problem? Who do we have to go see? The chief electoral officer. I don't want there to be any more events, any more days, any more calendar. Nothing. Let's just go.
Right.
Gonna find a nice chalet to put Carney in for the next 5 weeks. Fine.
So Scott, here's the reality. There's two realities for you. One of which is the Liberal Party has not gotten 45% of the vote in an election campaign since Pierre Trudeau did it in 1968.
Right.
It was the last time the Liberal Party got 45%. Second thing I will say is that the Conservatives are only 4 points off Harper's ever peak and a majority victory. Like 36 is not a brutal number for them on day 3 of the campaign. The issue is the other parties, the NDP and the Bloc, right?
Yeah.
And so that's really the Conservatives' dilemma. It's not that so much that their vote is a problem. It's that there's frankly no NDP and a weak Bloc vote right now.
Well, and who knows what's going to happen with the NDP? It doesn't, sorry, Jordan, doesn't you don't see ingredients for a rally there. Maybe if people start to perceive that the Liberals are well ahead, maybe a bunch of NDP voters just decide to come back to the fold. But I think if you're the Conservatives, being in Quebec is fortuitous, because I think you've got to hope that there's some life gets blown back into the sails of the BQ, because if like they're a shift of 4 points, like a trade-off between the Liberals and the Bloc of 4 points could mean a dozen seats, easy peasy, right? Like there's a lot of seats that can fold around that relationship. The other thing I would say about 1968, you say 45% for the Liberals, first time since 1968. I think it's like, as a history nerd, there's so many interesting reference points from history. You go like, this is the first time. Like the 68 election comes up all the time because you say, well, you bring in this technocrat outsider to revive a flagging Liberal minority government, and suddenly they call a snap election and they sweep to this big victory. So that's one comparison. Then we always start talking about 1988, where you get a single issue campaign that's based around free trade that watches the NDP get pushed to the margins. Then you talk about 1980, which was an election where voters said, you know what, we have to actually purchase a prime minister. So we're going to go out and we're going to get Pierre Trudeau to take on René Lévesque and the referendum, and it divided the country regionally on a partisan basis because the West couldn't believe it. That feels like there's just one comparison after another from various elections of yesteryear, and I think it just is a reminder, and I'm sorry to sound giddy, but it is a reminder that this is such an historic, such an interesting, like we went through such an agonizing Ontario election where nothing about it was surprising, nothing about it happened, nothing about it changed. And yet here we are, and you know that you are in a historical lab experiment. It's pretty fucking cool to watch.
Right.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's interesting. I would prefer the 88 comparisons because yes, while the NDP didn't win, of course, they got their third best result. So there was still a case that, in that election that was one of national crisis, that there was a role for the NDP there and voters agreed. So I think, just to go back to the question of what's happening with the NDP vote, I think Scott makes a really good point here. The Liberal vote, we know right now it's very wide, but it's very shallow. It's very soft. And so there's still a lot of capacity for things to move over the course of the election because we are on day 3. We are on day 3 of the election. So if I were a Liberal, I would be nervous because this is early. This is early for things to crest very, very high. And they've not yet locked in that vote. And I think that one of the dynamics that I'm on the lookout for is where voters think this election is going to land. So when we get into a situation where a majority of voters start to believe that a Carney victory is inevitable or a Liberal victory is going to happen or is near certain, and the concern about the inevitability of a Pierre Poilievre and a Conservative victory fades, so too does some of the impetus for strategic voting. And that does create more space for the NDP to go in and get back some of those voters who maybe on a values or on an issue set level are typically more interested in the NDP. If that fear factor diminishes a little bit, it's an easier row to hoe to get them to go back in. And I think the other factor as well is that if we get into a situation, and I'm not saying that we're there yet, because again, it's day 3, we're not there yet. But if it starts to look like a certain Liberal majority government, then there's a question of, is the NDP able to make a case that, look, we're going to be there to hold these guys to account. We're going to be there to deliver different things. And I think that they have a strong case there. Like, the only difference between the Liberal government that voted against pharmacare and the Liberal government that implemented pharmacare was the NDP. So they can go out and they can make that case. And I think that there will be a pocket of voters there who believe that that's a valuable thing to have the NDP there to hold them to account.
It has come to my attention that I, Gary, the AI-generated voice who shills for air quotes media, am not popular with our listeners on YouTube. Or should I say one listener goes by an alias of cutlery and soiled clothing. Well, suck it, Fork Laundry. This one's for you. Actually, Forky, it's a proposal for everybody, and you're gonna like it. Advertise on air quotes pods, and you can get my nauseating voice off the air. Because your message will be read by one of our influential and human hosts, David Herle, Kate Hammer, or Mike McDonald. Or just record any piece of creative in your ad agency's fancy production studio and send it to us. Either way, you'll be reaching Canada's most influential listeners at this crucial intersection of politics, and who knows what the fuck happens next. Trump, a new prime minister, new economic policy, a whole new world order. Baby! My data points are tingling. Curse of Politics, the Hurly-Burly, and Hotel Pacifico have the ears of cabinet ministers, elected officials, and the political class, leading journalists, the C-suite, and tens of thousands of engaged Canadians. Prime influence time. So let's do Forky a solid. Email us at contact@airquotesmedia.com to get rid of Gary and get your message to the decision maker.
So Jordan and Scott, I want to, I don't mean to keep pounding away at Singh, but I would put a possible alternative thesis that if I was in the NDP campaign headquarters, I would be thinking about, which is, I don't know how easy it's going to be to convince people in this environment the positive merits of Singh or the NDP that justify taking a risk on Carney losing. And that's as long as those voters feel the way about Carney as they currently do. I think the NDP have as strong an interest in going after Carney and taking
absolutely.
him down as the Conservatives do.
Yeah. And I would say it's interesting, though, like that as a communications challenge for the NDP is always a tricky one. And I mean, you guys can speak to your experience with this as well. What is the most effective way for the NDP to come at a Liberal leader that people are feeling favorable towards? New Democrats have a low opinion of strategic voters, but most people who vote strategically think that they're doing something quite heroic. And so it is important tonally how they go after those leaders. And in that case, I think that it's all about doing it in sadness and disappointment rather than in anger. So the tone is not the same. It's not to say that Poilievre is the same as Carney. That's not the argument, but it's to go in pretty incisively and say, we understand people are worried, but it's too bad. It's too bad to see that, Mr. Carney, who spent his life listening to big business and to millionaires, is now rolling out policies that are going to benefit big business and millionaires. And it's to make that tack. And I actually really I thought the NDP had a clever hit yesterday. So as you can imagine, the pull within the NDP to do deep policy announcements every day is strong. So I tip my hat every day they resist it. But what they did yesterday is they went into a rental complex. So, an apartment building that had been taken over by Brookfield. Well, Mark Carney was the chair there, and they went and they spoke to the tenants who were dealing with rent hikes, who were dealing with bad maintenance, who were dealing with just completely unaffordable and unacceptable living conditions. And that allowed Singh to go out and be like, look, this is the world that Mark Carney helped build. This is it right here. And we're now in a place where 70% of rental in Canada is owned by companies like Brookfield, run by people like Mark Carney. And that is not in your interest. That is in their interest, and they profit from that. And I think that
he wants to be Canada's landlord, and the elevator won't work.
Well, and I gotta say, Scott, we don't know how much money he makes from that, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, I liked that. I think that is incisive, that is applicable, that is directly at Carney in a really sort of material way that fits the NDP frame. So those are the types of things I think you're going to be seeing more from them as they try to make Carney obviously distasteful for those progressive voters and really underline where the difference in his focus for his career and his loyalties have been.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think we need
that's a good segue.
But can I just say, I want to say two quick things. Obviously, we don't need to intellectualize it. If I can't make myself pretty, I can at least scratch the other guy's face. That's got to be the NDP strategy. But on this idea of, once people start to realize that the Liberals had this apparently sizable lead, then how does that alter voting dynamics? What kind of new pressures does it put on Carney? What kind of room does it leave for the other parties to return some of their vote? There's a flip side to that, which is I still think a lot of people find it hard to believe the Liberals are in the lead. And yet Leger gave us a number yesterday that said 48% of Canadians think that the Liberals are going to win the next election. I find that a reassuring number because it means that they're not withdrawing in horror at the idea. And I get that it unleashes some other pressures, but those are good pressures to have if you're in the Liberal Party coming from a 26-point deficit. People now actually are starting to process the fact that the Liberals could lead. It isn't causing them to go, oh my God, that's a horrifying outcome. And we know that next week, Trump is going to smear himself all over this election campaign. And it'll suddenly be an events-driven few days on the election trail. It won't just be about what the people are trying to position and offer as political parties. So I don't know. I thought that 48, you're the pollster, David, but I thought that to see that number gave me some hope.
Scott, isn't one of the problems though with having an early lead like this for Carney that there could have been a weeks-long narrative in this campaign about this titanic struggle between the two sides.
Yeah.
And the story would have been, can Carney knock off this juggernaut that's been in place? But now that he's got like a 9-10 point lead, doesn't the story have to turn to him? And it becomes an accountability session for him. Well, you're going to be the prime minister, so let's examine you. So the story's off of his heroic fight to stop Poilievre and on to, okay, well, let's take a look at you.
Well, man, hey, if you want to win the election, you want to be prime minister. He's had something of a blessed existence so far. Like you're going to have to actually You're going to have to turn some fastballs around at the plate. So I do think that in a weird way is a good problem to have. It is nevertheless a real problem.
Well, it is in the sense that it's always better to be ahead than behind. This is Herle's maxim of campaigns. Always better to be ahead.
It turns out winning is better than not. But
I'll still say this: I'm not convinced, even though I just cited that Leger number. Like, it goes back to the point you're making about the rallies and so forth. By the way, the Conservatives are they may down. They are definitely not out. And there's, it just seems to me that there is a refusal. Even if you look at, and okay, I'm 57 years old, whatever I am, right? So you have to look at me. Maybe I'm the only one looking at mainstream media, but the Sun chain, Post media chain, you look at media, media sources, they're not reporting this campaign like it's a runaway train for Carney. Like the Sun chain had a whole series of columns yesterday about how Carney is evil and how, don't believe the pollsters. The energy is real for the Conservatives. And so that I think somewhat blunts it as well. And we're going to get a second week that won't be about Carney. It's going to be about Trump, which I think creates a natural and very welcome buffer in a short campaign for the Liberals.
Yeah, I think that week that flips back to the Trump issue is only going to benefit Carney. That's a real point, I think, for and it also spends time, right? We saw this in the Ontario campaign. If you've got that lead, you are also marking time. You're trying to get through those days without something coming off, right? And so they're going to have an opportunity for that next week.
So speaking of mainstream media, the story of the campaign as I absorbed it yesterday was, every party had announcements. Carney did the shipbuilding military thing in Halifax, and Poilievre did the GST break on first-time home buyers or new homes, whatever it was. But I don't think that kind of stuff is penetrating, and I don't think this tiny variances in these policies is going to move anything. But what was happening yesterday was dueling allegations about foreign interference. It started off with a big Globe and Mail story from Fife and Chase, who Conservatives suddenly decided were Liberals and Liberal sympathizers because they reported this story. I think we've all been clear on this show over many times that those guys are equal opportunity fuckers. And
Fife does not check your lanyard before he puts the knife into your liver.
Exactly. So they ran this story about how CISA says that India was helping Poilievre in the leadership. They don't think that Poilievre knew about it. They don't think it was material, but they think it existed. And Carney uses that as an excuse to go back to Poilievre's lack of clearance on security clearance. But Polyev fires back with I'm clean, but he's dirty because he cut a deal with the Chinese government for a loan to Brookfield um, before he came into this job. And so he is beholden to the Chinese government. Jordan, winner, loser?
Yeah, these attacks are not equal. Let's put it that way. Although I appreciate that, the conservative instinct that a good offense is the best defense here. But look, and I think the thing that's so damaging about this story for Polyev is that it continually drives back at a question that he's been really unable to answer in a coherent way. This guy wants to be prime minister and will not get his security clearance. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense when he explains it, that it's going to muzzle him. People do not buy it. It's weird, it looks cagey, and it reinforces this idea that he's got something to hide. So every single day that that story is out there and being talked about is a bad day for Pierre Polyev. I thought that the story that
Your
they
former
launched back,
boss, Mulcair, is giving him the best air cover he's got on this fucking story. What is that about?
Well, I mean that's I think that's Tom's view on it, right? I don't share that view. I don't know a lot of people who share that view. And that includes security and intelligence experts. They don't share that view. And I think most Canadians don't share that view. There's an expectation that if you're running to be prime minister, that you would be able to deal with top secret information, that you would pass such a clearance, and that you would have the ability to get that information and make public what is possible to make public and not make public what is not to be made public. And so I don't think his story makes any sense. I think every day it comes back is bad for him because it really reinforces one of his weaker storylines over the last year. And the offense about Carney, the difference is that where the attack against Polyev plays into a storyline that Canadians are now familiar with because we have heard this story before about Polyev not getting a security clearance. The other is a newer attack on Carney. I think you need more scaffolding for it to really stick. It's not of the same caliber. We're talking about a conservative leader who wants to be prime minister, who had a foreign government interfere in a leadership race and is not curious to know more about that. Like, that is disqualifying. I really think it is.
Well, I guess it is curious as to why India would give a shit about who was the conservative leader, right, Scott?
I don't think that part's hard to understand.
Why?
Well, because they're in the business of interfering with as many G7 countries or OECD countries as they can. I don't think we should allow our national insecurity to overwhelm us on this case. I think if they can plant people and have an effect, they're going to do that. And by the way, Fife and Chase are at it again this morning. The front page of the Globe Mail is aimed at the Liberals, saying that the reason Arya was dropped is because he had an undocumented, undisclosed trip to see Modi last year. And, when Carney was asked about this yesterday, he said, listen, there's a green light committee in the party. I actually don't even know the details, which I think he thought was an insulating comment. I thought sounded a little bit at odds with his meta narrative, which is I'm an in charge and large leader. It had a little bit of I have to eschew knowledge and responsibility. I think two things. One, I thought that yesterday, I didn't think the pushback from the Conservatives on Carney with the China thing, I didn't think that was very strong. I don't think it really got noticed. But I'll say yesterday we saw both leaders having to play defense a little bit. I thought actually the more interesting thing for Carney was the TVA debate and getting pushed on it. Why did you say initially you would, and then your team says no, and then you worry in your English and your French is not good, and so then you're on defense. And we've been in campaigns where you go, holy shit, man, am I screwing up in Quebec? And it's a bigger issue than I think.
Carney had a bad day in Quebec yesterday. Bad day.
Yeah. So
because it wasn't just he got pushed hard on TVA, and the second thing was the mispronunciation of the candidate,
Natalie Provost,
misstatement of the candidate's name, and the getting wrong Concordia versus. I mean, this is a kind of a thing in Quebec.
That's right. It's like,
Huge
what? We'll forgive some bad accent, but you're telegraphing that you're not of this place, and it's all it's all briefing notes. And so I thought that I don't like the Polyev line on the security clearance, but I thought we'll see, but it felt to me like he was like, I'm going to give my standard reply. I'm going to try to bully this thing through. Whereas I thought on Quebec, Carney looked a little less certain, and it felt so. In terms of them both playing defense, I thought we saw a little bit of a contrast, to be honest. I do think ultimately the Conservatives have a bigger problem because I think foreign interference is going to continue to run. Even though today's headline is about the Liberals, I actually think it's bad news for the Conservatives because it keeps the issue of foreign interference in the news. It keeps reporters who are thoroughly unsatisfied with Poilievre's response on security clearance. And when he insists, well, I already had security clearance because I was a minister, they like roll out 100 experts. Nick this morning in his column for Politico has Wesley Wark saying, well, that's just bullshit. It's not the same thing by any stretch of the imagination. So it'll be interesting. This issue is going to stay. And it does telegraph again, the fundamental takeaway, whatever his reason was for not getting the security clearance, is it telegraphs, I'm somebody who thinks about politics constantly. I'm not as serious. And I think that does.
Or I think about politics, and that is superior in motivation to me to the national security interest.
Right.
That's
so
the
I
deadly
think it's,
piece.
and we're going to get another day of questioning about foreign interference, and it'll go to the Liberals, but it will lap up on the shores of the Conservatives, and he'll be forced to talk about his security clearance again. And it just kind of contaminates a day.
I don't know if this is just the liberal in me seeing this through a partisan lens, but I think the problem with the argument is, like, why wouldn't you want it? Like, it just doesn't make intuitive sense why you wouldn't want the security clearance.
I get sat down in a room, and then the Liberals tell me what I can say. They give me little crumbs of intelligence, and it all just sounds so defensive.
You have to be pretty
it sounds
pretty
petty
conspiratorial
and
to
conspiratorial.
believe that.
That's right. It sounds petty and conspiratorial. Like the national security apparatus is not out to get Pierre Poilievre, but that is what it sounds like when he talks about it.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Let's wrap it up with a blessing or a curse. What do you got, Jordan?
Well, I can't decide if it's a blessing or a curse, but I guess it's maybe a blessing. So it turns out that deathbed conversions are not just for Liberals. We saw Pierre Poilievre out yesterday saying that, wait, I'm going to keep dental and pharma for people who have it.
He did.
Don't worry.
No, but there's an M dash there. Like,
I'm not going to take away your current coverage. Yes,
right.
For sure.
Yeah.
So that is what I am circling. This is not the same
The work
thing.
on your molars will be covered, but those incisors, that's on your
Don't worry.
wallet.
I'm going to go in with a scalpel and just like carve away. So anyway, do not believe this. Like, this is complete crap. This guy voted against all of it. But I adore, it delights me that he feels obligated at this stage of the campaign to make such a declaration. And that tells me more about what's happening internally with them than these rallies do. So I guess it's a blessing.
All right. Scott?
My blessing goes out to Sean Fraser, who had announced that he wasn't going to be running again. And now he has announced he's the latest Liberal member of Parliament who had drawn the curtain on his career and now has decided to spring it wide open. And
he spent 10 minutes with his family and he's like, no, I'm good.
He's a great guy. I think he's a young guy, which is important and really important from my perspective for the future of the Liberal Party. And so I'm glad to see him running again. I'm glad to see him back in the harness. And by the way, it sets up a super interesting race because he's going to be running in Central Nova. Former MP and Minister Peter MacKay is going to be running in Central Nova. So that's going to be a clash of the Titans, and it's going to be super interesting to watch.
Well, did I miss the MacKay announcement?
Is he not running?
I didn't know that.
I'm pretty sure he's running in Central Nova. I mean, maybe I'm out to lunch. I thought Peter MacKay was running in Central Nova.
Well, let's check that out. We'll come back to you tomorrow on Curse of Politics with an update.
I sound stupid. I thought sure he was running. I'm going to look it up as you speak, David.
Yeah, my blessing goes out to the Conservative tour because I think not every one of them looks good, but I think the stagecraft has been excellent so far. The energy on the tour is amazing. And as I said, I think they are fighting the momentum story quite effectively with these large rallies. And you got to be impressed with these rallies. Anytime you get thousands of people in a room, it it reflects really strong organizational skills, but even more importantly, it does reflect a baseline of support, because you can't do it. I mean, there's a reason the NDP aren't holding rallies in arenas, even though they're great organizers, because if the people aren't there, you can't pull them. So
Opportunity cost.
I think the Conservatives' road game is off to a very, very strong start. Scott, did you find an answer to your question?
I cannot confirm that he's the Conservative candidate in Central Nova, but I know that was the speculation. So we'll have to see. We'll have to see I don't know who their candidate is there.
Ben Mulrooney.
That is not true. I saw Ben Mulrooney last night, as a matter of fact. I bumped into him. Well, we'll see. Well, I don't know what I'm talking about. Don't come to this pod for information. Just
No, it's entertainment. Have we not
just
been clear?
Vibes,
this is an
people.
entertainment.
Just
pod?
This is sorry. I'm on the center square here in Hollywood Square. Oh, I thought it was a sailor. Paul Lynn all the time. I think though that I think I'm going to be right. I think McKay, unless McKay's decided to back off, I thought he was running there.
Yeah, that's your line now. He backed off.
Peter McKay. Yes.
He saw that opportunism coming in hard. He ran right away.
Peter McKay sniffed out the Sean Fraser return before I did and backed down. This event that you know nothing about occurred, but invisible to you.
All right. Thank you both. We'll have Kory back tomorrow. And we'll be redoing all this tomorrow. We'll have more fresh Polera polling. We'll have Nick Taylor-Vasey back for an update, and we'll see you all then. I want to thank our polling sponsor, Enbridge, and I want to thank Nick and Sue and our friends at Politico for supporting us in this endeavor. And all of you, Accursed, who watch or listen to the show today, thank you very much, and we'll see you tomorrow. Take care of yourselves.